I'm Ryan, this is my brother Daniel, and this is Rolls in the Family. And today we're going to be reviewing L.L.A.M.A, or Don't Llama as seen on some English editions, which is a light game about trying to get rid of all of your cards.
And if you're looking for a light card game that appeals to people who maybe like Uno but want to spin on the formula that has a few more interesting decisions, then Llama is definitely worth checking out. And as always, we've got a link down in the description below if you want to check it out for yourself after watching this review. But let's jump right into it.
Llama is a race to get rid of your cards each round as you try to accumulate as few points as possible. Cards that are the same or one higher than the current discard can be played, with Llama cards connecting sixes back to ones in a loop. To give yourself the best chance of winning, you must balance dropping out of a hand early to cut your losses with the allure of staying in the round and trying to go out. Rounds are played until a player reaches 40 or more points, at which point the player with the fewest points is the winner.
Unlike many shedding card games, whenever you can't play in Llama, you are faced with an interesting decision. Do you draw a card and stay in the hand, or do you drop out and lock in the points remaining in your hand? Staying in the round is always tempting, not only because you could get rid of more cards, but because going out allows you to return any point chip to the supply. Since the chips come in 1 point and 10 point denominations, going out could lead to a big 10-point swing.
Consider a hand where you are down to just 2 5s. If you go ahead and fold, you will take a guaranteed 5 points that round. But if you draw, what are the chances you will be able to get rid of both 5s as the round goes on? If you happen to draw a 6 or even a llama, suddenly your point total has jumped to 11 or even 15 points. But you feel so close to going out. It is this tension between quitting and pushing your luck that drives the gameplay in Llama.
Llama plays well anywhere from 3 to 6 players, but we have found that it tends to be more fun at larger player counts since there's an added energy at the table, and it creates an interesting dynamic with how much the current discarded value can change between turns as players drop out of the round. The Llama theme here is completely arbitrary, and while it gives it a light and funny flavor, it is effectively an abstract game.
We will talk in this review about how we love that there are more interesting decisions in Llama than what meets the eye. That said, in the broad spectrum of board games, this still stands as a light game where luck plays a much bigger role than skill. The game is very interactive as everyone contributes to the shared discard pile and decides when to fold out of the hand, but there are also many times where your decisions won't really be influenced by other players. We still think it leans more towards being interactive due to the feel around the table as quick turns keep everyone engaged.
Setup is a breeze. Just deal everyone 6 cards and start. Llama is very light on rules, and any confusion can easily be alleviated by just starting to play. There isn't much setup variability here, but the fact that it is a card game means that the shuffled deck will have each hand playing out differently.
Gameplay in Llama flies around the table, keeping everyone involved with a nice group energy. The dynamic of the pile looping through the numbers elicits reactions from players as the values increment either more quickly than they want, or it goes all the way around the table with everyone playing the same number. In our groups, playing llamas tends to start a llama party, where everyone is excited to dump high-point llama cards from their hand, and then we trash talk the party pooper who decides to end it with a 1. There's also a neat dynamic in how the pacing changes as players drop out of the round. With a full table, the pile can almost fully loop between your turns, but once you are down to 2 or 3 players, the numbers can only shift so much, which has an impact on your decision-making.
The core decision of when to fold is an interesting one, and you're tempted by staying in, especially since going out allows you to return a chip. Also, there's a little bit of push your luck when you have 2 options of which card you can play. Do you play one that you have multiple copies of, hoping you will have the opportunity to get rid of the rest? Or do you just get rid of a card you only have 1 of, even if it reduces the chances of playing the other cards? I have been surprised by how many times in such a simple game I have had a turn where I go, this is actually kind of interesting.
When all players drop out except one, there is this chance for an amazing moment when that player can no longer draw, but they can try to play out their entire hand. This adds another interesting layer of push your luck because you could actually try to shoot the moon by drawing cards to fill in gaps in your hand, but it is risky if you don't get the right cards or if another player goes out. But it is definitely an exciting moment when the final player unloads a huge sequence of cards, turning what looked like a terrible hand into a win.
Since going out allows you to return a chip to the supply, and some chips are worth 10 points, there's always a chance for a player to come back. I actually had a game where I was a few points away from 40 and managed to come all the way back and win by going out a couple of times in a row. That comeback potential keeps everyone invested and can make for some nice, dramatic swings.
We don't really consider the luck factor here a downside given the style of game, and we have been pleasantly surprised by some of the interesting decisions that emerge out of such simple gameplay. However, one downside to that interest being so emergent as opposed to being obvious from the rules is that many players may brush it off too early as a game with no interesting decisions. It's fun to uncover these little things as you play more, but we could see many people judging it negatively prematurely due to the simplicity and high luck factor.
While there are a surprising amount of interesting decisions in Llama, they are still outweighed by turns where you may feel like you are playing on autopilot. The impact of this is lessened in a game that moves so quickly around the table, but some players may not like a game where several turns or even a whole round goes by without a particularly meaningful decision. And now, let's get to our personal ratings for Llama.
So I picked up Llama because I wanted a game that is a really light, easy to teach card game, but I had seen some things reading reviews that looked like maybe it could, have a little bit of interest and could fill a niche. And for me, it has actually filled that really well, what I wanted it to be in my collection. And I'm going to be giving it a 7 out of 10, personally, for me. And given how light of a game it is, it's a pretty high rating. Like, if I look at other similar games that I've rated, like, Llama's kind of up there, and obviously I've decided that I want to own it. And it is just such an interesting game where the rules teach... you would come to the conclusion there's like nothing more to this game than like Uno or some of these other games.
It doesn't look fun on the surface.
Yeah, which doesn't look fun, but it has the advantage of it's easy to teach,
right.
And it's there's not that barrier for like people who maybe are intimidated by a lot of other modern board games. And I think oftentimes, the gamers bringing games to a group of non-gamers, we can think things are lighter than they are. Like, there's games in my collection that I'm like, that's a light game. And then I start to think about like playing it with certain people and I'm like, it's probably still more than what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And so Llama's nice because it really is pretty light and accessible. Like, people can understand that I play a card that's one higher. And while, we've talked in this review about, there's a surprising amount of interesting decisions. I don't want to go too far into making it sound like this is something it's not. Like, Llama's a light game. It's a really light card game. And you're only looking into this game if that's the type of thing you're wanting to find. You're wanting to find a really light card game that you can teach to people, but still has some things to keep you interested. And really what drives that interest in Llama is this element of push your luck. Whereas in a game like Uno, like if you can't play, you draw. It's not a decision point. Llama, it is a decision point. You have to decide, is it better for me to stay in or is it better for me to leave the hand? And the variables that play into that decision are more interesting than they have any right to be. Based on who's in the hand, what's my cards? Do I have duplicates of cards?
Yeah.
The other thing I love about it, and I think fills really well, and actually to Uno's credit, comparing the two a little bit, Uno, what it does do a good job of is kind of energy and drama of who's going to go out first and your hands go up and down. And that's why a lot of people really enjoy that game, is even though there's not a lot of really interesting decisions, it creates kind of a nice social energy with kind of some swings of who's going to go out first and stuff. And I think Llama does a really good job of maintaining that, both within a single hand of there's hands where nobody goes out because everybody folds, but there's times where multiple people are staying in or trying to go out. But then also over the course of a whole game, we talked about your big comeback.
Yeah.
The fact, it's such a weird arbitrary rule. This, if you go out, you can return any chip. It could be 1 point, it could be 10 points. But it is really what drives that ability to completely swing the game, which in this type of game, where I'm pulling it out at the end of a night with a group, and I have had actually good success with people that aren't all really light gamers, but it's just that, end of night, we just want to kind of laugh and play something light, and it's gone over really well. And
Yeah.
like people want to play it multiple times in a row. So yeah, I've enjoyed it. I know I've played it more than you have, but I know you've been in some of those what I would say were very kind of positive experiences of the game. I'm curious kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be coming in at the same rating as you, a 7 out of 10, which again, you were mentioning is really high for what the game is, because it's kind of funny. It's a game that you learn the rules, you're like, okay, this makes sense, and you start playing it. And at first, I feel like for most people, you start playing and it's like you're almost just playing on autopilot. It's just like, okay,
Yeah.
I just play the decision. It's just obvious. But then I feel like for every person, you hit that point in the game where you have to decide, do I fold or do I not? And it's like it just like hits you like, oh wow, this
Mm-hmm.
is actually really interesting. And so to be a game that maybe is uh, is compared to Uno, or just for people who like just really simplistic card games, to have just an interesting element like that, I think is key. I totally agree with the uh group element of it. You start with everyone in, but it's really fun because as people fold, there's kind of this increased excitement, when it gets down to you and one other person,
Yeah.
and you're like going back and forth. And then, the opportunity where if you're the last one, it's it's risky because you could obviously be stuck. But if you have the
Mm-hmm.
right hand, you can just start throwing down
Yeah.
cards. And we've seen times where someone has a huge hand, but they're the last one, and they like play their entire hand and go
Yeah.
out. And it's just this incredible moment. So I think it's a game that you have to kind of you're not going to be able to sell people on why it's fun just by telling them about it. Like, I think even if
Mm-hmm.
you explain the whole folding mechanic, like it doesn't click until you start playing it. And then you add in the arbitrary uh discard 1 point versus 10 points. It's one of those things that's like doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, makes for like a balanced game, but that's the whole point. Is in a game like this that you're pulling out at the end of the night, it's a light game, you're not really looking for the most, so the leader, like you want
Yeah. Yeah.
big, just unbalanced, like comeback
Well, and it
mechanics are
really,
huge.
because that core decision of do I stop or do I keep going, part of the reason it's so interesting is because the potential
Is so
reward
huge.
of you, it can be so big. And it's, oftentimes you get into the game where you're behind and you're like, I've got to like push it a little bit
Yeah.
more because like I'm not going to win. Or you can have interesting situations that where like, say you're down to just you and another person, and that person is at 38 chips. So it's like they're going to end the game because they're going to get to 40 points. But if I'm not winning, like, and assuming I want to play for first, I don't, not playing for
Yeah.
second or third, it's almost better for me to like stay in the hand to try to help this person go out so that the game doesn't end. And that's another one of those
Right.
things. It's like you wouldn't ever look at the rules and think of that situation.
Mhm.
And there's just other examples of like, with this type of game, you want the potential for like big highs with
Mhm.
like the group. And you talked about the kind of someone at the end of a hand getting to play all their cards. That's one of those moments that produces this big high because everyone's like, oh my gosh. And they're like so excited because that's like the ultimate play in Llama to
Yeah.
pull that off.
Yeah.
But then you also have, times where someone who is losing goes out and suddenly they swung 10 points down, other people swung up, and suddenly it's like, it's close again, or this person took the lead. And I think just those simple high moments in a game that, I mean, this game takes less than 20 minutes,
Very
oftentimes
quick.
closer to 10 minutes. Like
Yeah. Very
it
quick.
flies around the table. You're always involved.
Yeah.
It's just, it provides, ultimately with any game you're bringing to the table, you're wanting it to provide a certain type of experience.
Yeah.
And for certain situations, like Llama really facilitates that nice experience.
Yeah, it has a big focus on the experience, the excitement, the potential for comebacks, but then adds maybe different from Uno, a little bit of decision making. Like, again, not a lot. There's going to be,
Yeah.
I mean, I've had rounds where I think we played a game a month or two ago. I think I won, but I didn't even have to make really a decision. Like it just worked out perfectly. Now, I will say, even though I didn't make a decision, it was kind of fun. Just like, oh my gosh, this worked. Oh, it just like worked out perfectly. So even if you're not always making like super deep decisions, and you just have a round that just plays itself out, that can still be fun too. Especially in a game, like you said, that plays so quickly. And even if you maybe didn't have fun one game and it all went against you, well, the game's over in, 20 minutes or something like that. So those are our personal thoughts on Llama. But the real question is this quick card game one that you should check out for yourself?
If you don't enjoy really lucky games or games where the primary decisions are based on pushing your luck, then Llama might fall flat for you.
But if you want a light and accessible card game that keeps everyone involved, that is easy to teach while having a little more depth than what meets the eye, and that has potential for exciting moments and comebacks, Llama for us has consistently done a great job of filling that niche.
Hey, thanks for watching. We've got a link in the description below if you want to check out Llama for yourself. And we've got some other recommended videos on the channel here for you to check out. And we will see you in the next one.